lie to yourself at times, now you're falling apart. Soon giving in this time, 'cause we're falling apart.
Hello there and welcome to JW Watch. Excuse me if I skip the usual introduction because I am rattled, viewers. This is going to be an emotional one for me to deal with, because quite apart from the fact that I am an activist, we're coming up on 10 years now to following Jehovah's Witness related stories and dealing almost all the time with child sex abuse issues. I'm a father. I understand as a parent how vulnerable children are and how much they need and deserve to be protected. I'm also an IICSA core participant. IICSA, IICSA, standing for the Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse for England and Wales. I've devoted months of work in compiling evidence for the inquiry, done my very best to support it, wanted it to succeed. Even now, despite feeling really strongly, really badly let down, even now I want it to succeed. But they've failed us, quite frankly. They have failed victims of abuse in the Jehovah's Witness religion. And I'm going to explain how in this live stream. I'm hopefully going to be joined later by a guest who also has some experience with this. But allow me to, as much as possible, walk you through why I feel the way I feel, why I feel so defeated, frankly so betrayed by the independent inquiry. I'm going to start actually with this document, which is, and I'm not doing this to plug my book, this is an appendix from The Reluctant Apostate, which actually formed part of the evidence that I submitted to IICSA. As you can see there, it's headed Extrapolation on the number of child abuse victims. What follows is an extrapolation of the numbers of victims and perpetrators for Britain, Canada and the United States, based on the fact that 1,006 alleged child molesters were recorded by Watchtower in Australia between 1950 and 2014, and these 1,006 alleged perpetrators are said to have abused at least 1,800 victims. Publisher numbers for all 4 countries are based on yearbook figures. You see, viewers, behind me, as many of you will know, I have an extensive collection of Watchtower materials. I have every yearbook going back as far as, I'm going to say, 1938. So it's actually possible for me to, for every country that reports publishers, find out how many publishers there were in a given country in a given year, and therefore do a very careful, methodical extrapolation of what the numbers would be for, as you can see there, Britain, Canada, and the United States, based on those figures from the Australian Royal Commission, which were gleaned, by the way, by the Australian Royal Commission doing their job and going and getting the data from the organisation they were investigating. Fairly rudimentary thing, isn't it? If an organisation has a problem with child abuse and they have records showing how they're managing child abuse, you get the records. You don't just take their word for it that they're acting responsibly. You check their records to see what's happening. That's what happened in Australia. That's where we get the 1006 figure from, the infamous 1006 figure. And based on this extrapolation, which again factors in the numbers for each year between 2014, was it, and 1950, you can see that the numbers for, hang on, let me check. The numbers for Britain would be 2,324 perpetrators and 4,158 victims between 2014 and 1950. So it's safe to say thousands of cases of abuse that the organization has handled or received accusations and created records. So this is the first document I wanted to show you. The second document I wanted to show you, and let me just check what's appearing on your screens. Nothing. At the moment, I'm just trying to establish the fact, and you'll understand why later. I'm trying to establish the fact that there is a database. So now I'm showing you evidence that was given by Paul Gillies before IICSA. So this is actually a document that was written, dated 2nd of December 2019, and it was included in information that was downloadable following the hearing. So this is public information. And out of all of the pages of this initial statement that Paul Gillies, who is the spokesperson for Watchtower, he used to be the head of the branch office in Britain, but he's now working at the world headquarters in Warwick, same office building as the governing body, basically doing their bidding and promoting the organisation. He submitted evidence to IICSA, and I want to show you what it says here. Paragraph 78. Oh, it's not letting me highlight. Anyway, paragraph 78, you can see there on the screen, hopefully. Third, the branch office keeps a brief notation of each congregant who is known to have committed child sexual abuse. That's the database. So in Paul Gillies' own statement to IICSA, he acknowledges a database, and then on the next page, this for me was the bombshell page in his evidence. Page 23, institutional allegations of child sexual abuse. He gives a very limited breakdown of the data held by the UK branch pertaining to England and Wales. So not for the whole of the UK, just for England and Wales, limited to the years, you can see there, 2009 to 2019, a 10-year period, and further limited to cases deemed by him to be institutional. In other words, only cases involving elders and servants, or only cases where the abuse occurred inside a kingdom hall, and only cases where this abuse actually happened in 2009-2019. There's another paragraph, or there's a footnote that talks about these were the accusations that we heard of historic abuse, but we heard of them in between 2009-2019. So hopefully this explains that these are very, very, how can I put it? Very filtered figures, aren't they? So applying all of these filters, they had 67 accusations of abuse involving ministerial servants, elders, or occurring in a kingdom hall. Reported to the statutory authorities, 37, which of course means that out of those 67, 30 were not reported to the statutory authorities. And when I saw this, I nearly threw up. Because first of all, these are clearly manicured numbers, or numbers that have had multiple filters applied so that we don't get anything close to the thousands figure that I gave you earlier. We're also getting figures that even though they've had these filters applied, they're still damning, because they still show 30 people at large in the community circulating among Jehovah's Witnesses, likely to be elders and servants, not reported to the police. So the reason I'm showing you this is to establish, first of all, Paul Gillies admitted that there's a database. And second of all, he gave figures from it. They were very filtered figures, but they were still figures. So hopefully there's no doubt whatsoever by this point that there is a database. But for those of you who are still skeptical, let me bring this down. I need to show another image. Bear with me one moment. Producer Bob is here, but I like to do this myself. I don't want to overstretch Producer Bob. So bear with me one moment. And I'm going to bring up an image. I need to remove that first. Right. I don't know whether you can see it clearly there. I don't think you can. Let me zoom in a little bit. Will it let me get rid of that? No, it won't. Sorry about this. So what we have, this is actually, what you're looking at essentially is the database. And the reason why we have a picture of the database, and this is, as you can see, redacted. I've literally gone on Photoshop and blanked out all of the personal information. There's no legal reason for me to do that because the document is actually part of the new Montana lawsuit that Mark O'Donnell is covering. And one of the main reasons for the new Montana lawsuit is because of this document, which is actual physical proof that the database exists. It was inadvertently coughed up, you might say, by Watchtower's legal department. They thought in their defense, but the lawyers acting against Watchtower or trying to hold Watchtower to account are refiling the lawsuit based pretty much on these pages. And I've redacted the information purely to protect the victim because I don't want the victim's details out there on YouTube. But I don't know how much detail you can see. The resolution isn't what I'd hoped, to be honest. Let me see if I can improve it a little bit. No, that's a bit too much. Okay, anyway. Fact sheet, attorney-client privileged. You can see there at the top, no need to report. You can see all sorts of information that can be entered. You can, it says there, oh crumbs, let me bring that back. It says, the elders should verify with, and then I've redacted the name, that he does not want the matter to be reported. They should also try to ascertain if he feels he is any further danger. The caller was transferred to the service department for further theocratic direction. No need to report. Legal reporting advice. Based on the information provided and the law, the elders have no duty to report this matter to the authorities. Is that showing up clearly on the screen? Yes, it is. I think so. So that's one part of the that I wanted to show you. I don't know whether it will let me show you another page. Maybe it will. This is another page on the victim profile, attorney-client privilege. Let me just check if it's showing. Yes, it is. You can see there we have some very interesting boxes about consent. Consent, yes or no. At the top, no seems to be blanked out, but then further down, victim a willing participant, question mark. Apparently a victim can be a willing participant, including in a child abuse case. And I can tell you this is a child abuse case. In fact, I've left the age at the top, age 10. So you have there all manner of information. Where location did alleged acts occur? When did any elders find out? How did any elders find out? Reported to authorities? No, yes. You can see there it's blanked out. No. Or blacked out. No. Who else knows of the, and I think it's who else knows of the case. So that's another slide from the database, and here's another slide, the final one that I wanted to show you. Victim profile, attorney-client privileged. You can see there it's got space there for the father's status, which means is the father like an elder or a servant or just a publisher. What specific acts are alleged, how often. You can see their sexual is crossed off or ticked. When alleged acts occurred, victim a willing participant, there it is again. Where location did alleged acts occur? When did any elders find out? How did any elders find out? Etc. You get the point. These aren't just random notes scribbled on an elder's pad. This is a database form. This is information being put in digital form to the point where boxes are being checked. And this information, which was again blurted out by Watchtower and is now leading to fresh litigation in Montana, this is public record. I'm redacting it purely to protect the victim, but you could, if you wanted to, and you pulled the right strings, you could get the full unredacted document. I'm not recommending that, by the way, but that's what you could do. So, is there a database? Well, not only have we seen the damn thing, we've also seen a document filed as evidence with IICSA in which Paul Gillies has said, yes, we keep a notation. And oh, by the way, here are some figures from it. Hopefully I've established by this point, because you'll see why I'm stressing this point later, viewers. I feel like I'm going a little bit crazy with this. Let me bring up now. I now need to go back to the documents I was sharing previously. Okay. So I think I need to go to a new screen, which will show you an open letter to the independent inquiry. There we go. Share. Is that showing clearly? I think it is. So if I now scroll down, so this is a letter dated 19th of October 2020. This, I can tell you, is an open letter attached to a petition that was signed by 6,000 people. I think some of that 6,000 people may be watching. Fairly certain a good number will be watching. I signed it. And you can see there the highlighted text. I implore the inquiry to use its statutory powers under Section 9 of the Inquiries Rules 2006 to demand all data concerning allegations of child sexual abuse currently held by the Christian Congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses, CCJW, and all associated entities located within England and Wales. They weren't even asking for Britain. They were willing to accept that the inquiry was limited in scope to England and Wales. I understand that the inquiry's investigation into Jehovah's Witnesses is still live until findings are published. And by the way, findings haven't been published yet. They are due any moment. They could, as far as I know, they could be released next week. But until they're published, technically speaking, the investigation is still live. So if they wanted to, IICSA could go for the data. I feel that full data must be sought from CCJW if these findings are to be meaningful. The small selection of data provided by CCJW, and we've seen it already, haven't we? Namely, data relating only to elders and ministerial servants and connected to abuse within a kingdom hall reported between 2009 and 2019, is not representative of the potentially thousands, we know why it's thousands because I've shown you that as well, of the potentially thousands of cases of abuse beyond these very narrow, arbitrary criteria. So, by the way, all of these documents are available now, in fact, in the description. So you can, if you want to, you could even follow along, I suppose. But I'm showing you the documents so that you understand, again, what the situation is. The inquiry's website states, our remit is wide-ranging, but as a statutory inquiry we have unique authority to compel both witnesses and any material we feel is necessary in order to investigate where institutions have let children down in the past. While the investigation is still live, it is of utmost importance that the inquiry urgently uses its unique authority so as to avoid further spread of misinformation and harm to survivors who have been sadly let down by those they believed they could trust. Yours faithfully, all signatories to the change.org petition. So that's the letter that was sent to IICSA asking for them to, hopefully you noticed that it wasn't asking for IICSA to act as the police or to bust down any doors. It was literally just saying, you know that sample that you took from Paul Gillies, could it be bigger? Could that sample maybe be all of the data rather than just a tiny, tiny, tiny part? Don't the thousands of victims not included in that figure, don't they count? Doesn't that abuse count, IICSA? So if you have the power to look at that data, why on earth aren't you? You can see this is an emotional issue for me, viewers. Let me bring this down and add another add another screen. IICSA responded with this letter, dated 5th of February 2021. Dear Sir, Madam, thank you for your letter, blah, blah, blah. The inquiry has gained a substantial understanding of the very damaging effects that child sexual abuse can have during the course of its work. However, as an independent inquiry established under the Inquiries Act, it would not be appropriate for IICSA to have its work influenced by a petition. Who do you think you are, 6,000 people signing a petition? We're IICSA, so F off. That's the message I take from that. And if we scroll down further, the part that really grated, I mean, the whole thing is just a weasel way of trying to wriggle out of any responsibility. But the part that really grated, viewers, was this part here. Can I highlight it? Yes, I can. Thank goodness. Something's working. While it is true that the investigation will not formally conclude until the panel has published its investigation report, the only task remaining for it is the writing of that report. We've done our investigation. We're just writing at the moment. When was this written? Hang on a minute. This letter was written in February. They've been writing their findings since February. It's now flipping June. Who's doing the writing for them? And is it like one letter per day or something? Anyway, the only task remaining for it is the writing of that report. Taxpayers' money, by the way. This work is well underway in February, and it would not be appropriate, lawful, or fair for the inquiry to seek substantial additional evidence from any particular organisation in the manner sought by the petition at this stage of its process. I read that, viewers, and I was enraged. Because it's one thing to come up with all sorts of weasel excuses and say, oh, no, you don't understand. We're already writing our report, February. We're already writing our report. We've done all our investigating. Thanks all the same. One thing to give us all that weasel rhetoric. It's another thing entirely to lie. And that's what they did when they said it's not lawful for us to do this. It absolutely is lawful for a statutory inquiry tasked with investigating a religious organisation, if records are available, to look at those records and find out how bad the situation is. That is absolutely lawful. And I won't have Martin Smith, who wrote this letter, say otherwise. So this caused quite a bit of conversation behind the scenes, and I'm represented by Richard Scorer, who is a wonderful man, in my opinion, the most brilliant abuse lawyer in the United Kingdom. He's also incredibly busy because he's such a brilliant lawyer. And so we've been in touch, and I'd been saying, at some point we need to chase this, because it's one thing for them to not do their job. It's another thing for them to lie about the reasons why they're not doing their job. And I will stand by these words. This is a lie for them to say that it's not lawful for them to do their job. So that was the response from IICSA. I am now going to show you, if you'll bear with me a moment, the email that Richard Scorer sent on my behalf at the beginning of... Producer Bob, can you just nod if that document was seen on the screen? I can't see it now. Oh, right. Sorry about this, viewers. Let me just check. I do apologise, viewers. In this case, let me quickly show you I just want to show you the relevant paragraph. I was reading the document thinking you were all following along, and clearly you weren't. Okay, is this showing now? Yes. Yes, I have a thumbs up from producer Bob. So this is what I was just reading. You can see there the highlighted paragraph. You can see there where it says, this work is well underway and it would not be appropriate, lawful or fair for the inquiry to seek substantial additional evidence. And there is the name, Martin Smith. Remember that name, viewers. Remember that name. Okay, and now I'm going to show you the email that Richard sent. Juggling a few different screens here. Can you see this? I think you can. So I've got a thumbs up from producer Bob. So you can see there from Richard Scorer, 2nd of June 2021. So the beginning of this month. Dear Martin, I write under instruction from Lloyd Evans, who, as you know, is a core participant in the religious settings investigation. I am asked to seek clarification of your letter to Lay House dated 5th of February 2021 in response to the petition asking the inquiry to seek further disclosure from CCJW. In particular, the letter states that it would not be, quote, appropriate, fair or lawful for the inquiry to seek further disclosure from CCJW at this stage. I would be grateful if you could please clarify the basis for that assertion. The inquiry has wide powers under the Inquiries Act 2005 to compel disclosure, and these powers will last as long as the inquiry itself. Whilst it may be reasonable to seek disclosure from all the organisations being examined in an investigation on an equal footing in the first instance, plainly the inquiry's approach to disclosure thereafter must be informed by the evidence as it develops. If, for example, particular issues arise in relation to the adequacy or reliability of a particular organisation's disclosure, such that further disclosure requests become necessary in order for the inquiry to properly discharge its terms of reference, then inquiry has both the power and obligation to seek such additional disclosure. I think there Richard is trying to preempt the argument, oh, well, if we got CCJW's data, we'd then have to go after all of the other data from all of the other religious groups. I think he's preempting that argument, and he's saying, well, clearly, if you have an exceptional case where an organisation is egregiously mismanaging child sex abuse, you get to make an exception, is what he's saying, I think. We therefore do not understand why you consider any such further request of itself not to be appropriate, fair or lawful, and would be grateful if you would clarify further, dealing with each of appropriate, fair and lawful in turn. I look forward to hearing from you. Regards, Richard Scorer. Brilliantly worded email, gets to the point and simply says, you've said something, Martin, that isn't true. Please can you clarify? So that's the email from Richard to Martin. And yesterday we had a reply. Again, bear with me, viewers. So you can see there, this has come from the Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse. Dear Mr. Scorer, it's not a very long email, so I'll read the whole thing. CCJW database of potential child sexual abusers. Thank you for your email dated 2nd of June 2021, sent on behalf of Lloyd Evans. While the panel has powers under the Inquiries Act 2005 to compel the production of evidence and witnesses, it is axiomatic as a matter of public law. Axiomatic means self-evident. It is self-evident as a matter of public law that it must exercise these powers for the purpose of fulfilling its terms of reference. I made clear in my letter dated 5th of February 2021 that the inquiry has obtained all the documentation from the CCJW that is necessary for it to conclude its programme of work. In these circumstances, it would not be appropriate, lawful or fair to exercise those powers for another purpose, i.e. to obtain a secret database of potential offenders. My blood was already boiling by this point, and I haven't even got to the second paragraph. But what you have here is circular reasoning. So what he's saying is, yes, it's lawful for us to get whatever information we need, so long as we're doing it for the purposes of our investigation, and we've decided that we don't need it for our investigation, therefore it wouldn't be lawful for us to go and get it. That's what Martin Smith is saying here. It's circular reasoning. It's a fob off. It's not an answer. It's a non-answer. So the lie stands. The lie stands. He said it wasn't lawful, and he hasn't given a satisfactory answer as to why it's not lawful. And as for here, he says, he suggests that what was asked in the petition was that the inquiry use its powers to obtain a secret database of potential offenders. I think we've established that the petition that was signed by 6,000 people was simply saying, you know that tiny, tiny, tiny sample that you allowed Paul Gillies to fob you off with, could you maybe make it bigger so that it includes all the cases? Because we think all of the victims are important. I know you don't, IICSA, but we do. So please could you do your job, if you don't mind, and go and get all the data. And now you'll understand why I was going to great lengths to establish the existence of the database in the second paragraph. As I explained in my separate email to Leigh House, dated 4th of March 2021, the panel is very conscious of the terrible impact of child sexual abuse, but cannot act in a way that is unlawful. No one's asking you to act in a way that's unlawful. The appropriate authorities for investigating individual allegations of non-recent abuse are the police, who have the correct statutory powers to seize evidence and investigate crime. We're not asking you to assume the role of the police. This is a straw man argument. You construct a straw man argument when you want to make the other side's argument sound preposterous, and that's what he's doing here. It's a logical fallacy. It's a fob off. No one was asking IICSA to do anything unlawful, and no one was asking IICSA to assume the role of the police. And then you have the final insult in this disgraceful email from Martin Smith, solicitor to the inquiry. If such a database of potential offenders exists, then it is the police who have the correct powers to seize it, not the inquiry. If it exists, it's not a question of if it exists. You know it exists because Paul Gillies told you and gave you a tiny, tiny sample of it. And yet here, and despite that, here he is putting the issue of whether there is a database or not, in my opinion, on the level of conspiracy theory. Oh, we can file this under QAnon and all that rubbish. It's just a theory, if it exists. He knows it exists because it was in the evidence. Has he not read the evidence?